I have a lot of questions about what's happening in Iran right now. How did the greatest military power in world history get stopped by a Middle Eastern country? Intuitively, it doesn't seem to make much sense. The US military has the power, the technology, the knowledge, and the skill to outright defeat Iran. So, why didn't they? How come Iran can open and close the strait like a water faucet? What's going on here? How do we make sense of this? Well, this isn't really about a war in the traditional sense of military strength versus military strength. If you just do straight military strength to military strength, there's really no contest here. The United States could just win if they could bring their full military force to bear. There are reasons why the US military can't bring its full force to bear on Iran. And we're going to talk about these and how they have handicapped the US military. The problem is not the military. The problem is politics. And this needs to be understood in the context of the military strategist Clausewitz. And he said that war is politics through other means. You don't have wars separate from the politics that start the war, maintain the war, and end the war, and what comes after the war. Everything humans do is politics, including war. We fight wars for political and economic reasons. And we win and lose wars for political and economic reasons. So today, I would like to share with you some of the thoughts and questions I've had about why the United States just hasn't outright won the war. So what's going on with Iran's military power? We'll call this asymmetry versus dominance. Asymmetry means the two sides fight the same conflict with different goals, different resources, different needs, and different methods. So in World War II terms, that's like, when the United States attacked the Germans, we fought the war with tanks. We fought the war with airplanes. We fought the war with battleships. We fought the war with machine guns and artillery pieces. And both sides had lots of those. And everybody just used them as best as they could to win the war. This would be what I would call a battle of dominance. Asymmetry is, for example, Vietnam or Afghanistan. The U.S. still has tanks. Now they have attack helicopters. They have planes. They have artillery pieces. They have exotic missiles. And the enemy doesn't have any of those. All the enemy has is some small missile launchers, machine guns, and their rifles, and their determination to fight. So you can see it's not a fair fight. It's asymmetrical. One side is considerably weaker and has different needs, goals, and resources than the other. How does that relate to Iran? Well, Iran is fighting on the cheap compared to the United States. The United States uses state-of-the-art interceptors to shoot down incoming missiles and incoming drones. We have stealth fighters, stealth bombers, aircraft carriers, night vision goggles, M1 tanks. All of these things, amazing pieces of technology. And the Iranians have a handful of boats, most of which got sunk, a bunch of outdated airplanes from the 70s. Most of them got shot down or blown up on the ground. A few tanks from the 70s, and lots of missiles and drones. Lots of them. These drones cost $400 or $500 a piece to make. So when the United States drops a 500-pound bomb to kill an Iranian, well, that bomb costs several $1,000s. Just flying the plane there costs several $1,000s, and fuel and maintenance, not counting the training of the pilot and all the support equipment that needed to be in place to execute the mission with the professionalism that the United States military has. This is being countered by drones that they bought off of Alibaba and being launched back at the Americans. Cost $200, $300, $400 a drone. They can fly 50 miles. The more expensive ones in the thousands of dollars can travel hundreds of miles. The Gulf isn't that wide, so they can cover the Gulf quite well. It costs the United States more to shoot down these drones than it costs for the Iranians to make them. They can make these by the hundreds, if not the thousands. We can only make our counter missiles, our interceptor missiles, in batches of 10 or 20 a week. So there's only one way this is going to end. The Iranians are going to be able to shoot more than we can shoot down. Yes, we can bomb their country into oblivion. That doesn't change the math that these drones are so cheap that they can still launch lots of them, that they can acquire them cheaply, and they can just keep shooting them. The Iranians have strategic missiles that they can launch at Israel, into southern Europe, into the Indian Ocean, into Saudi Arabia. They have a lot of these missiles. Same thing. The CIA estimates that after our 2 weeks of bombarding Iran into submission, the Iranians still have roughly 70% of their missiles and launchers still remaining. After we destroy each missile and launcher, the amount of time and effort it takes to kill the next missile and launcher goes up because there's fewer of them and they're spread over a very large area. Our bases don't move. The Iranians know where our bases are. They can fire their strategic missiles at our bases. They can launch our drones at our bases. The United States can bring unlimited power against Iran, but the cost of bringing that power is extraordinarily costly. The Iranians are doing this on the dirt cheap. They can keep this up for a long time. While it may hurt their economy dramatically, it's going to hurt our economy dramatically also. The other thing to keep in mind is Iran doesn't need to win this war. They just need to not lose it. The Americans need to win this war because we started it and because our prestige is on the line. So all the Iranians need to do is just outlast the United States, and they will win by a tie. An example of this is the uranium. The United States, when they went to war against Iran, stated explicitly and loudly to the world that they were doing this to stop the Iranians from processing uranium and building strategic missiles. The goal being is if they don't have uranium, they can't make nuclear bombs. If they don't have nuclear bombs, they can't put them on their strategic missiles, and they cannot fire those missiles into neighboring countries. This is a great idea. It's not really in the interest of anybody in the world that Iran has nuclear missiles. But there's a bit of a trick here. Iran didn't have nuclear missiles before the war started. And they won't have any nuclear missiles when the conflict ends. All they'll have is ICBMs that could carry nuclear bombs, which they had before and will have when the war ends, and the uranium that they could process into material that's capable of being used for making a nuclear bomb. And then they need to make the nuclear bomb. The United States is not going to get this uranium material unless it actually invades Iran and physically goes and confiscates the material, or persuades Iran to hand the United States the nuclear material. Iran can just wait out the United States on the nuclear material. We already discussed that. It's cheap for them to wait out. It's expensive for the United States to drag it out. So there's a very big risk that the United States will end this war with the nuclear material unresolved and still in the position of Iran. If the nuclear material stays in the position of Iran, the United States has lost because we have not accomplished what we said we went to war for. This traps the United States militarily and diplomatically, because if we don't get the uranium, we look weak. But the United States is not willing to pay the price to get the uranium. And the price is going to be billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, if not $1 trillion. And it's not something that the American people are willing to tolerate right now. And it's certainly nothing that the rest of the world is willing to tolerate. The rest of the world is willing to tolerate the status quo. Iran has nuclear materials, but no nuclear bomb. And Iran has missiles capable of carrying nuclear bombs, but no nuclear bombs. So then we will have spent all this time and money. We will have caused all this economic disruption for effectively no change from where we were before the war started. Coalition building, getting allies. Coalition is a fancy word for building allies and friendships. Requires trust, clarity, and shared goals. So when you ask for somebody's help because you need it, you don't demand their help, you ask for their help. You explain what the problem is to them. You explain why it's a problem. You then ask them what they can do to help. What do they think the solution is? You don't tell them what the solution is, not if you want their genuine help. Definitely if you don't want their civilians and their military to be killed because they're coming to help you. You don't threaten to take Greenland from them. You don't threaten to shut down their military bases. You don't demand that they give your planes access to their airfields. You ask, can we use your airfields? You ask, could you help? What could you do to help? This is especially true if the alliance that you join is a defensive alliance. NATO is a defensive alliance. These countries agree to help each other and protect each other when they're attacked, which is why everybody was so enormously helpful during 9/11. The United States was attacked. People were considerably less helpful when the United States decided to invade Iran. And at this point, Trump, working with Israel to attack Iran without talking to the allies first, without getting their opinions, without asking them what they can contribute, just starting a war, makes the allies feel uncomfortable jumping in to help, especially when Trump is demanding instead of asking. Even if they want to help, the public, the citizens who vote in those countries, do not like the way Trump is treating their country. They work hard, they pay taxes, they join their military to defend their country. They want to raise their children safely. They want to drive their cars. They want to have their own jobs and have their own life. And they would like the United States to respect them as much as the United States respects its own citizens. So even if the government may want to help Trump, the government has to explain to the people how, while Trump is being rude and insulting and demanding, what he's asking for is something that should be of interest to the country. Maybe it's something they should help. And then the people ask their government, well, why should my daughters go and die to help Trump? It's a legitimate question. Trump threatening to invade Greenland. Trump threatening to leave NATO. Trump withdrawing troops from NATO ally countries causes concern, confusion. If Trump wants to withdraw from NATO, why should NATO help him? And Trump's argument is, why should I be in NATO if NATO doesn't help me? Well, the reason Trump wants to really stay in NATO is because the bases, as we said, where he's flying planes to the Middle East, shipping missiles to the Middle East, these are all from NATO airfields and NATO ports. He needs those ports. He needs those airfields. He needs the hospitals and the infrastructure that all of these countries are providing because he's a member of NATO. If he turns off his relationship with these countries, it's going to make his war against Iran considerably more difficult. Trump, when he's threatening NATO and threatening his allies, is doing Iran's work for them. Instead of letting Iran do all the demanding and looking like the bad guy. And Iran is the bad guy. Trump is acting like the bad guy because he's demanding instead of asking. This leads to the next challenge. Iran's economic collapse. Iran's economy is in terrible shape. It was in terrible shape before Trump attacked them. The protests in January were in large part because of the economic collapse that was going on in Iran. It's one of those things that quite likely, if Israel and the United States had waited a few months, maybe a year or more, Iran would have just collapsed under the weight of its own incompetence and mismanagement. Attacking Iran at this time was partially a good idea because it's attacking Iran at a moment of weakness. It was also not such a great idea because Iran was weakening without the United States and Israel doing anything. That if they were just willing to use time, they would have achieved substantially the same goals that they wanted for considerably less effort. Just let time do the work, let the Iranians do all the heavy lifting of destroying themselves. Because Israel and the United States decided to get involved with this instead of waiting for time to do it, they changed the dynamic. Whether the people of Iran like the Iranian government or don't like the Iranian government, whether they blame the Iranian government for all of their problems or not, nobody likes to be bombed. Nobody likes to be threatened. Nobody likes to be attacked. So when you attack a country, whether the people like the government or not, they feel a need to defend themselves. And defending themselves means defending the government. The United States had a robust sanctions regime against Iran. This was because they got pretty much the entire world to agree with them that Iran was the bad guy and that if everybody sanctioned Iran, that it would produce good results for everybody. This was more or less working, which was one of the reasons why Iran was in great trouble before the war even started. The problem is, as soon as the Strait of Hormuz was closed, the dynamic changed. And now what countries thought was in their best interest is not what it was before. All the countries in the world need oil. They need lots of oil. They need that oil for their own economies so that their own people can get to work, so that their factories can build things, so that their country can grow and thrive. With cutting off the oil, the countries then have to ask themselves, are they more concerned about their country being choked by the lack of oil than they are about whatever Iran's problem is this week? Some countries, specifically China, and to a lesser extent India, both very large economies, were not predisposed towards American interests to begin with. And this is an opportunity for them to thumb their noses at Trump and the United States and take a different stance. And there's not really a lot that the United States can do right now. Normally, what the United States would do is the United States would get together with the EU and a bunch of other countries, and they would create sanctions against India and China to stop this behavior. But because Trump is demanding Greenland, because Trump is demanding tariffs, because Trump is threatening to leave NATO, because Trump is making fun of their leaders, these countries that would normally align with the United States and create these sanctions don't feel like it's necessarily in their best interest to do that right now. So this undermines the United States' goal to undermine the Iranian economy and bring Iran to the peace table. All these countries want is the strait to be open so that the oil can flow. They're not as concerned about the things that the United States and Israel is concerned about. So they don't have the same urgency to act that the United States does, or for that matter, Israel. So they aren't as excited about creating these sanctions and enforcing these sanctions. And China is deliberately ignoring the oil sanctions and said it's illegal for Chinese businesses to not import Iranian oil or to adhere to American sanctions. Other countries who need oil are watching to see how much China gets away with this, and if it gets away with it, they'll do the same thing because they need the oil. So since the United States is having a difficult time getting the rest of the world to sign on to these sanctions against Iran, they are stuck blockading Iran's blockade. This is system-level leverage. Hormuz is a global choke point. 20% of the world's oil flows through there. 40 ships a day were sailing through the strait. We're now down to 1 or 2. Normally, the rest of the world would see this as they need the same thing the United States needs. They need Iran put in a box. They need the strait open, and they would support the United States in doing this. It would all come together as a brilliant plan. But the United States wants to escalate the war. It wants to do more fighting. It wants to create other demands that the rest of the world hasn't signed on to yet. It has stated goals that it wants to accomplish out of the war that the rest of the world is not convinced is necessary. It doesn't matter whether the United States thinks or knows that this is the best answer. It may be the best answer for the United States, but just because it's the best answer for the United States doesn't mean that it's the best answer for every other country in the world. Every country in the world has its own particular problems, its own particular goals, and its own particular needs. If you want them to help, you need to address those problems, those concerns, and those needs. If the United States was able to get all these countries to sign on to sanctions against Iran, the United States wouldn't need the blockade. The sanctions would do exactly the same thing. Because the United States can't or won't build a consensus for new sanctions against Iran, because the oil supply is getting choked off, because these other countries feel like their concerns are being undermined by both Iran and the United States' actions, they are doing what they need to do to survive. And that means that the United States is currently bearing the brunt of the cost of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, specifically against shipping going to and from Iran. And this doesn't even stop all of Iran's trade. Iran is connected to Russia, so they can trade with Russia while the United States is doing its blockade. Iran has pipelines to other countries. There are roads connected to other countries. So they can bring supplies in, they can ship oil out, they can fly planes in and out, all without going through the American blockade. Now, the American blockade is expensive for the Iranians. It's also expensive for the Americans. And the question is, who is going to run out of time first? Who's going to get hurt more by this blockade? The United States or Iran? If the United States wants people to join it in the blockade, if the United States wants people to help keep the strait open, it needs to offer them something valuable. For every country, it's a different thing. But the vast majority of these countries want stability and consistency, which is not what the United States wants right now. The United States wants to rebuild the world order. And these other countries do not see that the world order that the United States is building is to their benefit. So they're not interested in helping the United States build this new world order. Iran's economy is already in collapse. The Iranian people have substantially already adjusted to a collapsed economy. They don't consume the amount of resources that people in the United States do. They do not expect the standard of living that people in the United States do. They literally don't have as far to fall when the Iranian economy collapses as the American people. They're willing and able, and the government is willing and able, to suffer the economic hardship that this war is causing. The Americans don't. We need the price of oil to be low because what we want to do is make money. We want to live comfortable lives. We want to trade and make deals and build businesses, make cars, write computer programs, play computer games, go on vacations with our family. All of these things take money and oil. So everything that the American citizens want out of their lives means more oil, more energy, and they want it to be, and they expect it to be, affordable. That was why Trump was elected, is because he promised to make these things affordable. Right now, as of the day that I'm recording this, the average price of gas in the United States has broken $4.50. This is not the peak. It's going to go up more. The reason it's not the peak is because only this week did the last tankers that left the Gulf before the war started have arrived at their terminals and unloaded their oil. All the world's strategic reserves, all the oil that was in those tankers is now gone. The demand for oil hasn't disappeared yet. People who need oil will pay more for the oil because they need it. The price of gas will go up. The price of diesel is still going to go up. It's going to take months, if not years, to replace all of the output of the oil that the world lost when the Gulf was cut off. The price of gas and the price of diesel underpins everything in the U.S. economy because we transport food. Transporting food burns oil and diesel. Farmers need oil, gas, diesel, and fertilizer. Fertilizer comes from the byproducts of refining oil. So the price of fertilizer is going up, the price of diesel is going up, the price of gas is going up. This means it's more expensive for farmers to grow food and ship it to the grocery stores where you buy it. The grocery stores need to refrigerate the food. They need to package the food. Those costs are going up. The price of everything is going to be increasing. We're at the beginning of that price rise. It's going to increase from now through the summer. Every day that the Gulf stays closed, the Strait of Hormuz stays closed, is one day longer that this inflation will last. This is going to carry over very strongly into the midterms. It is quite likely, depending on things, that the peak of this inflation will occur around October, right at the peak of the midterm. So Iran just needs to wait. They don't even have to wait that long. 3 months, 6 months at the outside. Trump and the United States needs to open the Strait of Hormuz today. Because even if they opened it today, it would take 2 months before all the oil flow, all the fertilizer flow would be restored, and for the prices to come back down. Iran knows this. Trump knows this. Some people in the stock market know this. Some Americans know this. I think most Americans don't know this. The inflation from the oil, combined with the inflation from Trump's tariffs, which is starting to take effect right now, is going to push inflation to very high levels. And that's what people are going to be voting on in the midterm in the United States. And that is what will decide the outcome of the war between the United States and Iran. The United States said that the reason they were going into this war against Iran was to stop Iran from enriching uranium. This was done after Trump said that the United States had destroyed Iran's uranium production capability. The United States now admits that there is refined uranium in Iran that could be turned into nuclear weapons, that our previous attack did not destroy that reserve. So we went to war against Iran to restrain, eliminate their ability to produce nuclear weapons. We do not have control of the refined uranium. We have not actually destroyed all of their uranium enrichment. We have not addressed their ability to continue to refine uranium in the future. And we have not actually stopped their ability to make nuclear weapons. Under Obama got the Iranians to agree to not enrich uranium. He got the Iranians to agree to inspections so that the United States and the rest of the world could verify that the Iranians were not refining uranium. Where we're at now is the Iranians could or could not be refining uranium, and the United States doesn't know how much uranium is actually refined, where it's stored, and all the capabilities that Iran has to continue to refine and store it. When we get to the end of this war, are the Iranians actually going to give up their uranium? Why do they need to give up their uranium? The United States can continue to bomb them. That's true. The United States could continue to bomb at a very high cost. This high cost that we're paying to bomb Iran so that it can't make nuclear bombs is being paid even though Iran has never produced a nuclear bomb and could have produced a nuclear bomb at any time. So what does the United States get at the end of this war if the Iranians still possess uranium and still possess the technology to build nuclear bombs? How is the United States and Trump going to get them to stop? We can't even get them to stop closing the strait. The only way we can guarantee that we get them to stop is if we can get Americans on the ground in Iran. Well, there's 2 ways to do that. One way is to invade the country, fight a long war, dig up all the uranium, all the production facilities, and destroy them. The other way to do it is make an agreement with the Iranians that the Americans can enter Iran and walk around and look for uranium enrichment facilities, and that Americans can inspect them. But that would require some sort of peace treaty, some sort of ceasefire, an agreement with the current Iranian government. It does not appear that the United States is willing to spend the time and effort to invade Iran and get their uranium because of the inflation that is being caused by this war and what it's going to do to the U.S. economy and to the world economy. North Korea has had nuclear weapons for 10 years now. They like to test their nuclear weapons. They like shooting their ICBMs off. Makes them feel good. But they haven't actually used them on anybody. So the rest of the world is saying, well, what's wrong with the Iranians having nuclear weapons? In fact, the Iranians are not even asking for as much as the North Koreans ask for. You got to answer that question for them. So what did the United States get out of this war? The United States military has demonstrated to the world, once again, that it is the most proficient, most effective military in the world. Everybody knew that before the war, and everybody knows it now. The United States has enormous financial leverage. We're the richest country in the world. All the biggest, best banks work in the United States. If you want to borrow money, if you want to lend money, if you want to move money around the world, the US dollar and a US bank is what you use. Iran has demonstrated to the world that if you're willing to suffer being bombed by the United States, your responses are calculated and measured. You can inflict enormous damage, economic damage, on the United States. If you're willing to give up the US dollar and give up access to US banks, there is a freedom to that, and Iran has demonstrated that to the world. Iran has also demonstrated that raw, unmitigated force doesn't solve problems. This isn't a huge surprise. The Russians are demonstrating that to the world more effectively than the United States could by attacking Ukraine, a much smaller country, a much weaker country. But Ukraine possessed creativity and resolve and has been able to address Russian aggression. The Iranians share a lot of the same traits. The way the U.S. needs to defeat Iran is it needs to play to its strengths and against Iranian weaknesses. The United States doesn't win by being aggressive. The United States wins by getting the entire world to cooperate with the United States. That's an extraordinary amount of power. It's why the U.S. exerts the world dominance that it has. We are not using that power against Iran right now. We're just going it alone. We can do it ourselves. It doesn't play to our best strength. Our best strength, the most powerful leverage that we have, is when we coordinate the efforts of most, if not all, the countries in the world to share in American goals, to share in American interests, to work with us, to spread American interests, and to spread American goals. We win when our allies win. If we don't involve our allies, if we do not engage the rest of the world, we lose spectacularly. And this war is showing that.